Hello, I'm Tessa Shepperson and I'm here with Ben Reeve Lewis, who's going to tell us what he's been doing with himself since he left Landlord Law. So, Ben, what are you up to nowadays?
I now work in a project called Safer Renting. We sit under an organisation called Cambridge House, which is the oldest settlement in Britain, started in 1883 in Camberwell in southeast London, where Cambridge law students went down and they dispensed free legal advice to people in the community. In the last 100 and so years since that, we've come on a long way since then. And Safer Renting was initially started 2 years ago, in April 2 years ago, to provide protection for tenants of rogue landlords. We're part charitably funded, but we also provide a tenants' rights advice and advocacy service for 4 different London boroughs who buy us in, and we act as their critical friends, and we are very critical because a lot of the local authorities are not that good at dealing with this kind of stuff. But more latterly, the way we've been getting serious funding from a number of organisations, and we're now involved with the local authorities looking into how criminals use the private rented sector for people trafficking and human slavery. Enforcement officers, environmental health planning, TROs like me, we get into these properties and you see the signs of people trafficking all the time. Massive overcrowding, high turnover, and most commonly when you walk through the door everyone gets their coats and leaves because no one wants to talk to you. And it's a really, really big problem, but it's only the enforcement officers who get into these properties, no one else does. And we're working with Dr. Julie Rugg from the Rugg Report of York University now, and over the next 2 years we're building a database to try and better understand how the criminals use the private rented sector for these purposes. Sometimes the landlords are in on it, but very often they're not. You give your property to an agent and the agent then rents it to a dubious tenant, and the next thing you know you've got all sorts of criminal activity going on in there. So it's a very concerning development. It's new to me. I've always been housing law and now I'm having to learn more about people trafficking and slavery, and it's quite shocking.
Must be really scary as well.
It is, yeah, you do meet some characters, I suppose it has to be said. Cannabis farming is a big one. That's very big in the Vietnamese community. That's the main perpetrators, and they'll often have children working in the cannabis farms who've been trafficked in there, and if they don't water the plants properly, they're beaten. It's a really, really heavy thing, but the problem with that is when the police go in, they will sometimes arrest the children as well for engaged in illegal activity.
When they haven't really got a choice.
No, that's the thing. It's sometimes they've got a choice, sometimes they know what they're doing, but trying to get to the bottom of it is difficult. There's lots of projects out there who map how criminals utilise various things for trafficking and slavery, but nobody is looking into how they're using the private rented sector. This is the development we've got, and it's not just a London-based, city-based thing at all. I know 2 London boroughs in Norfolk, where we are at the moment, who have got problems with overcrowding, that when they get in, they find that it's all linked to agricultural gangmaster scams as well. So years and years ago, I said in my speech that today that when I first started in 1990, your average rogue landlord was a guy with a broken nose called Ron and a baseball bat, and he could usually be talked around to some semblance of sanity. Now 90% of what we get involved in, it's systematic organised crime, because there's so much money to be made from it, and landlords are as vulnerable to this as anyone else. The rent up front argument is a common thing. They go to an agent who might be in on it, give 6 months rent up front, so everyone thinks, right, leave it alone, and then you go around and your place is a cannabis farm. And we're just phenomenal amount of these. We just fall on them by accident when we're looking on something else.
What other illegal activities? So there's people trafficking, there's cannabis farms. What other things do they get up with, and what do landlords need to watch out for?
Well, I mean, the cannabis farm is one thing. All you've got to do is stand outside the house and sniff. They really stink. But one of the big things is the rent-to-rent scam. That's probably the most common one we're getting now, driven by letting agents of dubious origin, shall we say, where they rent to a tenant, and the tenant, I should put in quotation marks, they then put 15 people in a 3-bedroom house. And the way they operate it now, and this is linked to trafficking a lot, is because they don't have people in their own housing benefit, because you don't want anyone claiming that's going to bring the council to your door.
Oh, right, yeah. So they're undercover.
Yeah, they're undercover. They're very difficult to find, and they move them around really quickly as well. I went to one a couple of months ago with an environmental health officer in Leighton High Road in East London, and we knocked on the door with some intelligence that we had, and we found 8 people living in these various rooms. They were very reluctant to let us in, and we got in there there and we sat around the table, and one said how she was late with her rent and the agents came around and stole her laptop and all the usual stuff. But that was on a Thursday, and when we went back there on the Tuesday, they'd all gone. There was a single family in there who swore blind they'd been there for 6 months and had no problems with the agent. So you're kind of running around trying to chase the tail. And in a sense, I'm hitting the limits of housing law, and now we're getting into, you know, this is criminal stuff here, you know, so we're trying to, it's a fast learning curve for me, really.
Yeah. So, is that your main work at the moment, or? Yeah,
well, I'm doing that kind of casework for sure, and we've got funding from the Legal Education Foundation, and many landlords will be pleased to hear this. What we're doing is developing an apprenticeship, the country's first apprenticeship for housing advisors and homelessness caseworkers, and we're working with the Chartered Institute of Housing, creating this for the Institute for Apprenticeships, and we're cross-mapping the development process with SILEX, the Chartered Institute of Legal Executives, so that when they've completed the apprenticeship, they will be qualified paralegals as well, not just having done an apprenticeship. So we're quite excited about that. And the great thing about it is, what's always astonished me, people at my job, where you come from, that you're making really serious, important decisions about people's lives. You're making decisions that are challengeable in court, and there's no qualifications for it. So as a trainer of housing law for these people, which I do all the time as well, another thing that I do, the knowledge level is thin to middling quite often, really, which I think is really, really bad.
So if somebody wants to contact you about that, how do they get in touch with you?
Cambridge House. My Cambridge House email is B Reeve Lewis at ch1889.org. Quite happy to do that. I've got a lot of landlords that I know, who I'm friendly with, who will ask me for advice on there, because it's not all, you know, although I'm an enforcement officer against rogue landlords, I meet a lot of really nice landlords who've got rogue tenants.
Yes.
You know, I have to kind of work with them. I would venture that I think there's probably more nightmare tenants than rogue landlords.
Well, there's more tenants, so there's bound to be more rogues, aren't there? So,
But, you know, the law, the problem is still there. One of the things we get asked to do a lot is to tell a landlord will say, is this property been abandoned? And I go out and we're scratching our heads because we're looking for signs of evidence of an intention to return, and it's not always easy. You know, they might be in prison, they might be in hospital. There's a website called findaprisoner.com, which I've only recently, it's not a dating website, it's actually somewhere where you can find out where someone's actually in prison. I think it's linked to the Ministry of Justice. Haven't used it yet, but it might work.
Put a link to it. Okay, Ben, thanks very much.
No problem.
Thank you for watching, everyone.